Good morning, my name's Bill and I'm an alcoholic. And today's share is called A Puppet on a String. Those of us that were around in the years after the last war have seen such a change in how we live. We've gone from black and white TVs with 2 channels, BBC and ITV, to eventually having 3 channels that included BBC Two, which was really big news in its day. TVs weren't colour then. They were just black and white, and used to bash them on the top if the picture wasn't very clear. And we've gone from 2 channel TVs to having mobile phones that we can zoom and phone anywhere in the world at the touch of a button. We've gone from bicycles to space travel. We've gone from walking everywhere to having satellites running our lives, and rockets going up into the sky, and computers, where in our day, if you wanted to know something, you either looked in the newspaper or you went to the library. Nothing was really on demand then. If you wanted something, you saved up for it. I saved up £12 for my lovely red bike when I was, 8 or 9 years old, and £12 was a lot of money then. A lot. I used to earn 25p an evening washing up. And so those £12, what would that be? That was 48 evenings washing up to get myself a bike. So much has changed. There was no microwaves. There was none of the modern conveniences we have today. My granny, who was born in 1901 and died in 1990, she went from cooking on open fires to the only transport was horse and cart. To when she died, there were things like microwave ovens and all the modern conveniences. And her house, I would think it was probably in 1915, before the First World War. Her house in Manchester was the first house in the street to have electricity put in. But it wasn't deemed that necessary to have electric lighting in the bedrooms, so they just had electric lighting downstairs and presumably a few sockets, where upstairs it was still the gas lights or candles. So in her lifetime of 90 years, they went from pretty well medieval to living in centrally heated houses, to having electric irons, to having cars, to having so many things that would have just seemed completely space age in her earlier day, as was when I was little, to see on the science fiction programmes a phone that you could look into and see the person you were talking to on the other end, that today we have at the tip of a finger, and it's called FaceTime. Now cornflakes and baked beans haven't really changed much, nor have eggs or butter. The wheel and the anvil have stayed the same from time immemorial. The birds and the bees, the grass and the trees, the moon and the sun, the clouds and the hills, flowers and bluebells and snowdrops, they're all there. But so much has changed, so much else has changed. But if you went to sleep 60 years ago and woke up today, so much is unrecognisable. My drinking actually started with a bang, and it was a bang. I picked up a drink, 12 or 13 years old, I got very drunk, I got very sick, the room went round, I felt ill, and yet I did it again. And I couldn't wait to do it again. And if that sounds familiar, that's because that's a repetitive nature of alcoholism, where however bad you feel after you drink too much, however sick you are, however terrible the consequences are, we always get up, sort ourselves out, dust ourselves down, and it doesn't take long before we do it all again. And that's called alcoholism. That's called the insanity that we find in the 12-step recovery program. Because most people, when they've drunk too much a couple of times, they feel ill, they become sick, the room's spinning round, they don't feel in control, and they say to themselves, I'm never doing that again, and they don't. But I always got up and dusted myself down and did it all over again. And I did it for 25, 26 years. And from those very early drinking sessions, from that very early age, within a very short period of time, alcohol was controlling me rather than the opposite way around. When I was young, A Puppet on a String was both a toy and a song that captured the imagination of the nation. It was sung by Sandy Shaw, and when we saw her on TV, she didn't have any shoes on, and that was all big stuff in those days. And looking back, that puppet on a string is exactly what it feels like to be an alcoholic. Where it felt like my movements, how I spent my wages, where I went, who I had as friends, my moods, my feelings. My whole life was being controlled by alcohol, just like a puppet on a string. The song that was to become number one just a few years before my drinking took hold, I can still hear in my mind's eye to this day. And feeling like a puppet on a string, being controlled, being manipulated, is in essence the very nature of addiction. Except that those who suffer from addiction, those who suffer from alcoholism or drug addiction, we don't see it that way. We see having a drink as a bit of fun, and we can't wait until the next time we go to a party. We can't wait till work to be finished each day to have another drink. We can't wait for the weekends. Because alcoholics have a built-in notion that they enjoy their drinking. And yes, I did have some good times. Yes, there were some good nights and some good parties. But the power and the strength that alcohol had over me, the powers and the strengths of the convictions that I had, where life was altogether better and effective because of the amount I drank, was actually just a load of nonsense. It was actually the other way round. And it was only on that day that eventually dawned, where I felt I couldn't go on living like I was living, that I had my rock bottom, and I eventually, for once in my life, admitted defeat, and I called out for help. And that was the day I called AA, and that was the day I was 12-stepped. And it turns out this past 26 years, if I haven't learnt anything else, I've learnt this one thing, that alcohol always did and always will have complete power over me. So after what was, in essence, a life sentence of drinking, I now see much more clearly that being a puppet on the strings of alcoholism was definitely my truth. It was the way I lived, and it was in effect the thing that guided me every day. And the essence of recovery is to reinvest in some of those old choices that were lost to my drinking. However, recovery isn't and wasn't everything I ever expected. As actually very little has actually changed in my life. And far from being released from the strings, from being a puppet to alcoholism, something even more bizarre has happened. In step 3, I was asked to turn my will and my life over from alcoholism to a higher power that I found in AA. So in effect, I went from one higher power to another. I went from drinking to Alcoholics Anonymous. And to help me on my daily trudge to get sober, I got a sponsor. Another nail in my coffin to thinking I could run my own life, that I could be self-sufficient. Recovery is no more than following a few simple directions. It's about copying those that have gone before me. It's about taking actions that are suggested and taking those actions repeatedly over and over again. It's about dancing to the tune of a 12-step recovery program. And whilst this might sound all a bit odd, it's exactly how staying sober works. So just for today, I'm still a puppet on a string, but today there's a difference. Whereas in my drinking, the puppet that controlled me then taught me only degradation, low self-worth, a lack of humility, anger, ungrounded and unfounded fear, and it took me to a place where I wanted to die. But my AA puppet teaches me, in a constructive and manageable way, how to live my new life. And all I've got to do today to stay sober is to not cut my ties with the one thing in the world I totally and utterly rely on, and that's Alcoholics Anonymous. And if I cut those strings from the one thing that is keeping me alive, and that's the 12 steps, I know one day that I'll go back to drinking, and I'll go back to being a puppet on the string of alcoholism. But just for today, while I go to my meetings, call my sponsor, do service, help another alcoholic, work the steps, there's one thing that helps me and guides me through each day, and that's the strings that tie me to Alcoholics Anonymous, where they show me how to walk and where to walk, and to walk with care, and to walk with purpose, so I don't walk down the wrong lanes or along the wrong fields. I walk with purpose where I need to walk and where I need to go, and I walk to the places that teach me how to stay sober for just one more day at a time, just for today. Bill the Shirt, Bristol.